Welcome to the Pindown, your Detroit Pistons podcast. I'm your host, Blake Silverman, writer for Detroit Bad Boys, covering everything Pistons, and news writer for Sports Illustrated. And we are not joined by Wes Davenport today, who's out on vacation. Apologies, we've missed a little bit of recording and trying to work out schedules on our end. So apologies, everyone, for the radio silence, but I'm really thrilled to be joined today by someone everyone probably already knows who listens to this podcast, Robbie Badalon of Detroit Bad Boys. You probably know him from the comment section as Bobby Buckets. But Robbie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. What a fantastic intro. We know Wes is clapping it up somewhere. He's proud of you for that one. So I'm doing well, man. Ready to talk some ball.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's long overdue to have you join. And yeah, just thrilled to have you on and talk some hoops. And here we go. I messed something up with the background with the music. So the music is off now and we are all good. So I wanted to start. I think I saw something on Twitter. Are you a Love Island guy?
Yeah, huge Love Island guy. So my girlfriend was not home last night, and so I didn't want to watch it without her. She ended up watching it with her friends, so I caught up this morning. So I mowed the lawn this morning, and then after I came back in, made a smoothie and got caught up on everything. So Sunday night, baby. Sunday night, the finale.
That is awesome. So, well, I'm not caught up. I think I'm like a couple nights behind. And I was like, it's just Love Island stresses me out because there's like so many episodes. You got to stay on top of it. But I like lost some sleep getting all caught up over the past week and a half. So I just have to watch the past couple of days episodes and then get ready for tomorrow. So I'm curious before we get into Pistons. Who's your favorite Islander?
Favorite Islander? Oh man. I'll go one guy and one girl.
Okay.
And actually there are a couple. So
okay.
I'm gonna go Pepe. I think Pepe is very much just a down to earth, like good dude who I think has just been like mellow the whole time. And I guess that's like how I feel like I am. So maybe I'm just resonating with that. And I also think Iris in the same way is very just level-headed, very chill. And I guess that's just kind of my vibe. So that's where I fall, which I guess I'm going to answer to my least favorite, who is on the other side of that spectrum, is going to be Huda. Huda is just my least favorite. Feels like a lot of toxicity over there. And I'm just can't believe America is holding on to her, for as long as they have.
That's very fair. We're kind of on the same page. I was gonna say Pepe is my favorite. I just think he's like,
and he's a hooper.
Yeah, he's a hooper. I actually went way too far back on his Instagram because I wanted to learn about his hoop journey, and I learned he played for Cal State Fullerton, and while he was there, they played an NCAA tournament game at Little Caesars Arena, which
I had no idea. What a fun fact.
Yeah, I learned that from his Instagram, but I was gonna say I really like Pepe until the scene where, and in case any of our listeners don't know what we're talking about, I apologize, but they had like a boys' day where they all went and played basketball. And Pepe pulled he did a figure eight between his legs while like taking steps and thought it wasn't a travel. And I was like, what are we doing?
Everybody pointed at him instantly. They're like, travel.
Yeah. But, oh man, I figured at least some of our listeners are watching. And if they're not, maybe their wives and girlfriends are. I know that's the story for some.
Yeah, they would love this Love Island intro.
It is a great show just to get your mind off whatever of the day is on. But all right, we're gonna jump over to Pistons, and a lot has happened since we recorded. The whole offseason happened pretty much. The Malik Beasley situation, which caused the Pistons to really pivot their plans at the last minute, occurred. We haven't talked about that. So I wanted to spend some time just like going through all the additions, the subtractions, and then of course the Pistons played their first summer league game last night too. So we're gonna get into that a little bit too. But for anyone who's joining us live on the DBB YouTube, feel free to throw your comments in the chat. We'll get to any questions or talking points you had. But Robbie, you wrote a great piece on Detroit Bad Boys about the Pistons offseason and like comparing the additions to who was in that role last year and why the Pistons could even be like a more talented team, or at least have a more talented roster on paper after how their offseason has played out so far. So as our guest, I'm gonna give you the floor. What is the story of the offseason so far? What's like the most intriguing point to you that you maybe would want to start with?
I think it's kind of cheating because he's not necessarily an acquisition this offseason, but I think the return of Jaden Ivey is really the biggest story because, I think he played 30 games last year, and like our 33rd game was that one against Orlando where he broke his leg. So I feel like we have viewed last year's Pistons team as much success as they had. They did it without Ivy. So bringing him back into the fold when they have missed that secondary playmaker, having to go get Schroeder last year, to slide him into that role, and then to also have someone who I think in Karis LeVert, who can really, I think he could play the one next to Ivy. Ivy could play the one next to Karis at the two. I think you could even have lineups with Karis at the three and Ivy and Cade both out there as well. I think we have a lot of versatility now in those guards. The other thing I want to say too is Schroeder was 6'1". Beasley was 6'4", THJ maybe 6'5", and we're bringing in Karis at 6'6", Duncan is 6'7", 6'8", so they're going to have a lot more size as well. I think I like the two acquisitions. They're both, cheap, short 2-year, 1-year deals. Essentially, with Duncan is essentially a 1-year deal. So I like that. Trajan is holding on to their flexibility. They both can shoot. Duncan, I'm probably most excited about because it was so depressing with, the whole Beasley news if he isn't coming back, just with how good of a season he had, but also just seeing someone who was so good at being a movement shooter. I do think Plan B Trajan found just about as good of a replacement as he could have for Duncan to take that role. So I think there are a lot of things that Pistons fans can be excited about, but I think most of all, their success next year is just going to have to continue to be youth development. It's like who's taking the next jump. I still think Cade could take another jump. We know Ivy. We still haven't, really seen what Cade, Ivy, Asar, Duran all look like together. In that piece, I found out that foursome has played 5 minutes together. So we have just about, no data on this young core and what they look like together. So most of all, I think it's kind of just like running it back. Let's throw some veterans in there again that can play, and let's see how these young guys grow.
Yeah, I think what you brought up about the size is a good point too, because I mean, one of my things with this team over the past couple years, I guess, is they've had this is more of a front court thing. So it's interesting when you like put it in perspective of bringing in these like combo guards / wings who are a little bigger than what they had before. But I'm like, it would just be nice to like have a 7-footer on this team.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't made that like acquisition for a big other than like bringing Paul Reed back on a small 2-year deal. So yeah, it's a good point. It allows some more like versatility, flexibility with lineups as well. And yeah, I've seen a lot of talk about potentially the biggest acquisition of the season being Jaden Ivey returning, being able to play next to Cade and Asar finally, and just finally, hopefully having a full season of this core group together with health. And you have Ron Holland, who will get into what he did in his first
Hooper.
summer league game last night.
Hooper.
Who knows? I would I would guess he would play one more summer league game, if that, because he did exactly what you wanted him to do. But
Mhm.
when you think of him potentially taking a leap, we know he can ideally turn into and develop into hopefully that secondary scorer who can defend a little bit. The shot looked good in summer league, but
Yep.
that's a work in progress. So overall, I'm with you. I'm happy that Trajan, it really like stuck to his word and all the public comments we heard that wants to maintain flexibility and just prioritize internal development, which is never, I guess, like the flashy thing to do in an off season. But this franchise to me was never, at least where they are right now, they weren't gonna go and put their hat in the ring for a Kevin Durant trade or something like that. So I think they did pretty well. And like, I think the one name you can be upset, I'm not sure if it is the right word, but they were right up there in the Nickeil Alexander-Walker sweepstakes. He goes to the Hawks. The Pistons get Karat LeVert, sort of. Maybe he wasn't plan B, but that's sort of what it felt like on the surface. But Nickeil Alexander-Walker gets a big deal in Atlanta, and you get Karis LeVert on the non-taxpayer MLE for a couple seasons. It's a shorter term deal. Like I like not committing to veterans that you're not sure about for long periods of time. So overall, I like what they did too. I thought your piece on DBB was interesting about how they can be more talented with the group, and you compare like Duncan to Tim Hardaway Jr. or whoever you want to do it. And like they brought in some good players. It's not like we're taking on dead money like Troy Weaver did with Joe Harris a couple of years ago. Like these are guys that are going to be impactful.
Our vets will be on the court. Yeah. They'll be playing.
Yeah. So that's all you can. So let's go through the offseason a little bit, and let's start with Duncan Robinson, because we were sort of on him. So he signs a 3-year, $48 million deal it was a sign and trade to come to the Pistons. That sounds big, but like you mentioned, it's really not. Only $2 million is guaranteed in the second season, and then the third season is non-guaranteed. I mean, it's a really team-friendly deal for the Pistons. And I think the interesting part of it is Duncan Robinson. We haven't seen him in a situation outside of the Miami Heat. Yeah. I mean, he was played for some really good teams, was an impactful player for teams who've made runs to the finals. So I think it's interesting to bring him into Detroit, especially like Malik Beasley just spent a year here last year. He had the best shooting year of his career playing next to Cade Cunningham. So maybe we see something similar from Duncan Robinson, who's a guy who shot darn near close to 40% from three on over 6 attempts a game last year.
Yeah, I when I first saw the contract, apologies if you can hear the dogs barking. So when I first saw the contract, 3 years, 48 million, it was like, ooh, that's kind of a lot of money for Duncan. And then when it came out that, year 2 is essentially 2 million and year 3 is nothing, to me it's like, all right, this is essentially a 1-year deal. If all goes well and you want to bring him back for a second year, awesome. Then he's essentially on an expiring. So I really, really like this deal for Detroit. Same thing. Trajan in the front office, they're savvy. Like they're creative in they obviously had to pivot this offseason after the Beasley news. So I think to land in this scenario with picking up Duncan on this deal is really interesting. I think the biggest thing, you referenced him playing in Miami a ton. His best playmaker was maybe Tyler Hero, right? I don't know if you would say maybe Butler, maybe Adebayo, but I'm excited for him to play next to Cade, for him to play next to Ivy, guys who really can, I guess, collapse the defense or bring more attention to themselves more than Hero can. And just to see how Duncan's going to benefit with like a pure playmaker, 9 assists per game, like Cade, you know what I mean? So I think Duncan should feel excited that he's playing next to Cade as well. The way that the roster is currently constructed, I was listening to the Pistons Pulse right before this, and I typed this in the chat, but I want to ask you as well. If we're dealing with our current 9-man rotation as to how we think it is right now, let's say Tobias Harris picks up 2 early fouls, like in the first 4 minutes. Who do you think's coming in for him? Because I could see Duncan coming in before Ron, but then do you move Asar to the 4 and Duncan's playing the 3? It just, with Duncan, I almost feel like he's kind of the backup power forward. Asar's kind of the backup power forward. So I'm happy with the 9-man rotation, and maybe we'll get into this later about Bobby Klintman as well, about how he has looked, and maybe he can handle 10th man minutes. But that has been the biggest, I guess, thing that I have thought of is if Tobias goes down with 2 early fouls, who are you, how do you tweak the lineup to adjust to that? And I guess by default, it's got to be Asar at the 4, but do you want Ron playing next to him? Do you need Levert? Is Duncan coming out? So I feel like Duncan is kind of like that backup 3-4 right now, which I think is a good role for him. He'll be playing 24, 28 minutes a game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if it is a early situation like that, if you are starting Asar, Tobias, and Jalen Duren, like, and Tobias is the one in foul trouble, I think you got to bring in like
the one shooter out of those 3,
or
you got to bring in somebody else that can shoot.
Exactly, because I mean, it's the non-shooting ability of Duren and Asar has been a talking point for years.
It will stay that way, probably.
Exactly.
Too. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and that's why like Beasley was so huge last year. Like your 6th man is one of the best 3-point shooters in the league, who's having this incredible season. And I think Duncan is like the best combination of size and skill set. I mean, maybe you're not getting a ton defensively, but like that's why you have Asar out there. So I'm with you. I think like Duncan is the guy there for me. I could potentially also see it being Karras, but I would be like, I'm intrigued by Ron Holland and Asar playing next to each other in like the long term. I just feel like they might not be at that point yet, and you want to keep things afloat, I guess, if one of your vets like Tobias goes out early, or if has to miss a game or whatever.
I think a lot of people would like to see Ron and Asar together on the court as well, but then I also feel like you need Stu at the 5, and he's got to be shooting again, unlike what he did last year. But it is hard, I feel like, to balance the roster with some of our young guys who are just, still on their way up of trying to be a threat from deep. But I will say, I do like, because we have a lot of, I would even Asar is a Swiss Army knife. You could call him a guard, you could call him a forward. I don't really know what he is, but the fact that he can play guard, you got Ivy, you got Cade, who can all play guard. I guess I enjoy that movement shooter role is kind of more from like the wing forward coming from Duncan as opposed to Beasley at this side, so I just feel like you can still run similar movements to get Duncan open, but it's just the offense is going to look different now because your guards are hopefully Cade and Ivy the whole season.
Yeah, 100%. And I know like our guy Bryce Simon at Motor City Hoops, he's if anyone's not subscribed to his Substack, you definitely should, because I mean, one of the best basketball minds that everyone knows that. But after all the Pistons acquisitions, he was sending out his like notes that he took on each one.
I was watching his little video breakdowns.
And breakdowns too, and everything. And like everything he had about Duncan Robinson was just like how good a movement shooter he is. Is he at the same level as Malik Beasley? Maybe, maybe not. But like he's still a very elite shooter and an elite movement shooter. And like you mentioned, someone who has bigger size that potentially makes those lineups when like a Tobias is in foul trouble, or I mean, hopefully not Asar, but he'll certainly be in those points
Yeah,
too.
he
It
will be.
makes yeah, it makes it like more easy to stay afloat in those situations, especially when you have to maximize your minutes, like get out to a strong start when you before Cade takes a rest. And
Mhm.
hopefully the second unit is I think they have a pretty strong rotation, like you said, and with Ivy coming back, hopefully it just looks good overall. But yeah, I mean, I like that. I think I'm happy that we're recording this like after everyone's had a chance to like digest these moves and know like the details of them, because I was in the same boat. Like when the Duncan deal of 3 years, 48 comes out, I'm like, ooh, I'm not sure about that. I was
Mhm.
still like, this Malik Beasley situation is so terrible. Like it really just sent the offseason off the rails. But when you get those details, I think it's a really it's like a low risk, high reward deal for the Pistons,
I
I think.
agree.
Yeah.
There's really no risk to them on a 1-year deal, and if you like them, you keep bringing them back. And I actually think it descends too. I think it gets cheaper as it goes on.
Yeah, I
Um,
had it pulled up on spot. Yep, you're right. It's 16.8 first year, then goes down to just under 16, and then the last year is just above 15, and that's all on Spo track. So yeah, if he does stay with the team through those 3 years, it is a decelerating deal, which definitely helps when, I mean, Jaden Ivey or Jalen Duren haven't
yeah.
gotten extensions yet. Asar is going to be extension eligible, and then Ron Holland too. So that definitely helps, especially when Cade Cunningham's deal got bumped up a little bit
Yeah,
because
he making even
he
more
makes
money
all
now.
NBA.
Yes, he is. I feel like the Pistons offseason started off very underwhelming because we heard all the news about Beasley, which of course it was disappointing, but it's also just like it was just a sad story in the first place. And then, NBA media, the rumors essentially pivoted to now the Pistons are looking into Karis LeVert, and it's like the skill sets just don't totally overlap there, so it just seemed a little off and whatnot. But with the Duncan news coming later, I guess you can kind of look at the offseason as a whole now. And I feel better about it than I did as soon as it was like Beasley probably not going to be on the team and they're going to go after Karis LeVert. And it's just like not off to a great start. But and I guess if we want to pivot to Karis right now, I was looking
Yeah,
back at some of his stats. I wonder how much JB played a role in wanting to go get Karras because they overlapped, I want to say at least 2 years, maybe 3 years in Cleveland. And I think even one of those years when he was in that 6-man role off the bench for Cleveland, like he had 5 assists per game. So he's very much capable of playing that kind of like 6-man combo guard role. So I do wonder just with him already having that relationship with JB, how much of that impacted, their conversations going into the summer.
yeah, it's a good point. And I think it might have been a bit of a perfect storm that led to Karis LeVert signing with the Pistons. Even if it was a Pistons fans' ideal outcome or not, but the Hawks like kind of went all in this offseason
Yeah, they did.
to compete. And I mean, I like what they did, but when so Karras gets traded to the Hawks at the deadline last year in the DeAndre Hunter deal, and he just is sort of the odd man out, and he's still like he's still can contribute to a winning team, and you just don't know what the rotation looks like there. And yeah, he spends 3 seasons in Cleveland with JB. He's there for an extra half a season last year on one of the best teams in the East coming off the bench. But yeah, like you mentioned, where I'm intrigued mostly is like the Pistons just always needed more guys who can dribble, pass, shoot. No matter like what your team is looking like more of those guys obviously help compared to less. So I think that was just trying to keep things afloat after you are losing some guys who were big contributors to your team that are past season. So I like LeVert, whether he does start at points, whether he mostly comes off the bench. Like, I'm really interested in him as a secondary playmaker because he's not like a ball dominant guy by any means, but he can flash, like make plays for his teammates as well. Like, I feel like he gets pigeonholed into just a scorer and maybe even like a net negative sometimes, which I feel like isn't very accurate. And then you loop in the shooting of it. Like, he shot over 37% from three last year, over 40% when he was with Cleveland before he was traded to Atlanta. And that's all on decent volume. Like, he took over 4 threes a game last year, and he's been up to like 5 attempts per game at points in his career and connecting on those at high volume as well. So I think I think he'll be pretty low maintenance in terms of where you can play him. And yeah, I would be shocked if like JB wasn't highly involved in that situation just because of how much experience he has playing with him. And you hear every team say this, but they want to bring in guys who are going to be good leaders in the locker room and everything like that. And we saw how important that was last year with the vets that they had. But yeah, I think Karras really like fills a need, and it's another fairly low risk deal, like 2-year, $29 million. He's right at that non-taxpayer MLE. That's what they use to sign him. It's similar. It's a lot less money, but the deal is like the exact same length as what the Pistons signed Tobias to last year. And like now Tobias Harris is on an expiring deal. So like if the Pistons want to make a trade to bring in a big name who's making a lot of money, like Tobias currently sort of almost has to be involved in that deal. But Karras LeVert, even if it doesn't work out in Detroit or they need to like use his deal to go and make a trade, like I feel like it's a fairly tradable contract, especially when it turns into an expiring just a year from now.
Yeah, same thing with Duncan. His is essentially, if you keep him next year, you kind of have 2 expirings, both at roughly, 15 million or whatever it is. The LeVert signing reminds me of like watching the NFL draft and your team takes a center. It takes an offensive lineman in the first round, and you're like, it's not sexy, but we needed this guy. You know what I mean? Like, he fills a need, and I also think just his versatility, like, you can play him next to Cade, you can play him next to Ivy. If you need him to run point, like he could run point for you in a little, in spurts. And I think the most important thing is like we have more opportunities to give Cade a breather on the court from not having to create the offense so much, with Ivy being back, with LeVert being able to handle that. So I do think, like, especially with Cade, he didn't shoot as well in the playoffs as he did this whole season, but just to give him a break for a second so he's not gassed and creating the offense. We have more guys who don't have to do it for the whole game, but while Cade's sitting, or if you want to run a play for Cade on the weak side and have Ivy be the one or LeVert being the one passing it to him, I definitely think there's again another low risk signing. You already got the JB connection. He probably already knows what his role is, how JB is going to use him, and of course playing with his old Michigan teammate, within Duncan. There's a lot of cool things that there are a lot of connections that go into this signing too.
Yeah. Are you a Michigan guy?
No, Michigan State.
Okay, me too.
Yeah.
I'm a Michigan State guy, but like I think the Wolverines connection is like, it's funny. The Orlando Magic were always like the Orlando
the Wagner twins. And
they kind of
Jet Howard was over there, and
they kind of still are a bit. But the Pistons, like both of their big acquisitions this year, are Michigan guys, which I mean gives fans like some, like maybe people who, I feel like the Pistons got a lot more fans involved with their season last year, but I feel like this gives even more. I feel like Karras he was one of those guys who I was like, he's going to be a Piston at some point. Like his name was always tied to them. So it makes sense, I guess, that he's now in. Duncan was always a little bit of like a trade candidate, but he never got traded. It's almost weird to see him not on
it's
the
weird
Miami.
To see him not in Miami. Yeah.
Yeah. But like he was kind of another one of those where I was like, if he's going to play for someone else, it kind of seems like he's going to play for the Pistons. And it seems like really like just basketball wise, like it makes sense. This team makes sense for where like what both of these guys like skill sets are and also like where they are in their careers.
For sure. I felt that way last year with like the Beasley and THJ stuff as well. Just like, hey, you're not at the end of your career yet. You're still playing good ball. And and we know you're not going to be here long term. And they just, it's like they come in and they know exactly what's expected of them. Be a leader in the locker room, help our young guys out. And it's enjoyable, I guess, that people want to come here and do that. And I don't know if I don't know if they grew up, Karras and Duncan, if they grew up in Michigan at all. But I do wonder if like, I want to go back to the college days where I was before. I also think it's funny that Gary Harris was really the only one on Orlando holding it down for Michigan State. At least they had him there. I don't know where he's at now, but
yeah, I think he signed somewhere else.
I think he did too. I just couldn't remember if it was Orlando or not.
Yeah, funnily enough, I don't think that either Karras or Duncan grew up in Michigan, just spent their college days here.
Yeah.
Like I know Duncan's from the East Coast. Gary Harris ended up with the Milwaukee Bucks. So
okay.
Yeah, that's
the Gary Trent Jr. role.
Yeah, yep. They have both the NBA Garys in Milwaukee now.
Yeah, there you go. Both shooting guards.
Yeah. So no, I can see them like wanting to come back though. Like they both had good careers at Michigan, and so it makes sense. But all right, let's switch gears a bit and talk about the departures. I feel like the big question going into the offseason, and still a question, like debatably it could be whether Jaden Ivey and or Jalen Duren are going to get extensions. That hasn't happened yet. We'll see how that plays out, or if they go into restricted free agency. But other than that, it was these three key veterans that were part of the team last year: Tim Hardaway Jr., Dennis Schroeder, and Malik Beasley. Are you going to bring one of them back, two of them back, all of that? What's going to happen? It seemed like Malik Beasley was the most likely to be retained. He had a career season in for a big payday that it seemed like the Pistons wanted to give to him until that horrible story broke literally a day before free agency. So his status is still up in the air. He remains unsigned. I think the Pistons retain his like non-bird rights since he played with them last year. So they could give him like a 1 year, I think it's like a little over $7 million if he is cleared and they want to bring him back, but we'll see what happens with that. And the news that we do have is Tim Hardaway Jr. is off to the Denver Nuggets on a small 1 year deal. Dennis Schroeder gets a big payday to go to the Sacramento Kings, 3 years, $44.5 million. He's signed with the non-taxpayer MLE over there. And that saga of the sign and trade of like, are the Pistons getting anything back? Malik Monk was a name that it seemed like Sacramento was trying to get off, might be coming back to Detroit. That did not happen. The Pistons they get a big trade exception and send out a pick. So we'll see how and if they use that trade exception over time. But what was your take on these departures specifically? Like, did you think that either were going to end up in Detroit, and were you surprised by where either of them landed?
I don't think I'm surprised. I feel like the Schroeder news was pretty right at the beginning that he was
Mm-hmm.
heading towards the Kings. THJ, I would have been happy to bring back on a minimum deal. I didn't, I don't know that you would have wanted him as a starter again and he wouldn't have given, the Ivy and Asar injuries. It was kind of like Ivy started and then Asar came back and then Ivy got hurt. So THJ was really filling in the whole time. I mean, he played his role, he made some big shots. Defense, was the biggest hole there, but happy for THJ to, he was great in Detroit. What was he on? Old man in the three or whatever's going on with Cam Johnson and JJ Redick's friend. I forget how they're connected or
Yeah.
whatever. He had a lot of nice things to say about Detroit on that podcast though. So that's cool. But his best chance of winning a championship is going to be with Denver over us. So can't blame him. I'll miss seeing Tim Hardaway Sr. on the baseline every time the camera cuts to him. The Schroeder news is interesting. So Karis LeVert and Schroeder got paid the exact same thing. Karis just a 1 year cheaper. So we're already trying, you can see into Trajan in the front office's vision with they're just not trying to hold on to long-term money, and really anything over 2 years, we have not seen them sign anybody else or trade for anybody else that's more than or 3 years or more. The Cade extension is really the only thing. So going back to what you said earlier too with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, he got more than the MLE and he got 4 years. So after seeing those other deals come out, it's like you feel less disappointed that those guys are not coming to Detroit because you can kind of be like, all right, I see what Trajan is thinking. He's trying to keep his flexibility and whatnot. So I thought we were going to have a nice boring offseason of Beasley, THJ, Schroeder. We're going to bring them all back and we'll just do this thing all over again. So they obviously had to pivot to plan B, but again, kind of like seeing Robinson's original deal of 3 for $48. And I was like, the Schroeder deal, I don't know that I would want Schroeder 3 for $45 for that long either. So I feel like the biggest thing on the internet right now for Detroit is like who's playing backup point guard and who's playing backup power forward. I think backup point guard is essentially going to be a point guard by committee. Like I think Ivy will handle some duties. I think Levert's going to handle some, and I also think Asar is going to handle some, probably a little bit. And I would rather those reps go to Ivy and go to Asar rather than give Schroeder that deal. So, I was happy with those guys' performances last year. Schroeder had hit some big buckets in the playoffs too. Seemed like he bought in for the 30 games that he was here. So, wish him nothing but the best.
Yeah, I think like I think transactionally these departures and the additions that the Pistons made make all the sense. Like Dennis Schroeder, he deserves the payday he got, and from his like comments about like leading up to free agency and after this deal goes official, like he wanted to be a starting point guard, and there just wasn't that opportunity.
He wasn't going to get it here.
Exactly. And he probably was like, is like a low end starting point guard in the NBA, really high end backup point guard if you have him in that role. But he's 31 years old. That's a potentially like a negative deal in the last year of it. And I mean, hopefully he overperforms and like doesn't fall off a cliff or anything like that. But I think, and you're bringing in free agents like Karis LeVert is 30 years old, Duncan Robinson's 31, but like you said, shorter term. So I think it's safer. And when you have this young core who, other than Cade, we don't know who is going to get extended and when and how much. I don't personally think of the young guys. They have one that's like a shoe-in rookie max extension right now. Mm-hmm. I think like Asar or Holland are the most, I mean, Ivy and Duran aren't getting maxes. So, and Asar probably won't either. but you never know what's going to happen. Like we just saw the Oklahoma City Thunder, like Shea got the biggest contract ever.
Yeah.
And then they extend Chet and J-Dub right after. And they're going to be dealing with second apron stuff. So that stuff like changes really quickly. So I think the vision of just trying to keep that flexibility has been something that since Trajan has come in, he's said it, that's a priority, and all his moves sort of go into him sticking to those guns. And I know when he first came in, like there were a bunch of front office hires of like he brought one of his cap guys with him. So
yep. Like Blackstone.
Yeah. And I think like they are just taking this really just making sure that if there is that swing to make for a trade down the road, whether it's this year or next year, they have the flexibility to do it or get someone in free agency. Like I feel like this year's free agent class there were some good players that the Pistons got a couple of them, Atlanta got a couple of them, and like the Kings bring in Dennis Schroeder, but I could also see it if you give players like a longer term deal just because like you need to bring them in, it could be a contract that you're trying to get off towards the end of it. And I don't think like the Pistons are in those situations. So yeah, when you put the Beasley news aside and like look at THJ and Schroeder, I would have maybe like I was a little surprised that THJ signed with Denver. And I think when it happened, it was kind of in the timing of like the Pistons offseason there wasn't a clear picture. Like maybe Malik Monk was still in the picture a little bit.
It threw another wrench in like, oh, now that's not, or there goes THJ.
Yeah, it kind of like threw the vibes off a little bit, but now it makes sense. And like Denver made some moves too. So hopefully he can go and get a championship. And I think what sucks is just like how well the Pistons group like clicked last year, and we went into the season with really like no expectations after winning 14 games, and then you get this group that overperforms, all enjoys each other, and then three big parts of that. I know Schroeder came in like halfway through the season, but they're all gone. So it's kind of just like puts how much last year was a special season into perspective.
For sure.
I think they could have another team like that. But you don't know, I guess. So I think more so as opposed to the deals themselves, I think the only bummer for me is just like, these were good guys that, like in the locker room, contributed on the court, and just knowing that team we had last year isn't going to fully be the same. Like we won't have it again, but that's just how the league works, I guess.
Yeah. I bet Karras and Duncan are good guys as well. I think my favorite THJ like cheerleader moment, I think it was after Ivy had hit the and 1-3 against the Kings.
Yeah.
And he was doing his press conference and THJ was banging on the glass. He was like, hey, that guy's really good. And it's just like, all right, those are the kind of guys you want in your locker room around those young dudes. So definitely seem like good dudes, but it's tough, man. Then it's like, yeah, NBA is a business. Like, you know, it's just tough where, you know, we finally have like a season to hold on to after all these seasons that we've just been trying to throw away. And it's like, all right, no more Beasley, no more THJ, no more Schroeder. It's on to the next year.
Yeah. And I think like, I guess the backup guard position is like one thing you can look to on this roster, but you saw this front office get Schroeder last at the deadline, basically as for nothing, like as a throw in to make a bigger deal work. So like if the Pistons are in a similar situation where they need another ball handler, like a guard to run the second unit, like why can't they do that again at this year's deadline? Like I'm sure it doesn't have to be a big trade that they have to make, but we know how this league works. There are going to be stars that want out, and with all the cap rules, like they need other teams to help them, and the Pistons could potentially be in another situation to get a backup guard for cheap during the season if like there are any injuries.
Kobe White fits into the TPE. There's
I
still
don't know
got the
what
TPA to
Chicago
play
is
with.
doing.
Who knows what they're gonna end up doing with it? But you're definitely right. There's a lot of flexibility moving forward, but I also enjoy the bench has a lot of versatility. I feel like you can pick and choose. You can put people in different spots to create different lineups and be like, okay, I still think this can create some type of offense or defense, whatever it is that you're trying to do with that lineup. But I do enjoy the versatility of the bench. They're probably missing one more guy, 10th man-ish kind of guy, but who knows? Who knows who that is? Do we already have him? Maybe.
Right. Like maybe it's Bobby Clintman, maybe it's Chaz Lanier. But we'll see it. The roster where it's at now, it has some room for like guys to play their way into the rotation. And I mean, maybe someone we think is a part of the rotation is eventually out of it. And like injuries always happen. Like we never want to see them, but there's gonna be stuff that happens, unfortunately. So I like it was they had good depth last year. Like the playoff series against the Knicks, I think the Pistons were a deeper team. The Knicks are the more talented team, but that stuff helps you throughout the season and if you're competing for postseason. But before we switch gears and talk about like what's going on now that Pistons are in Vegas for Summer League, we sort of mentioned it, but the only transaction we haven't really dug into is the smallest one of the bunch, but Paul Reed officially comes back on a 2-year, $11 million deal. Do you think his role will be pretty similar, especially just like with Stu and Duren still in the fold, like no changes in the front court really? Or do you think Reed could have a more consistent spot in the rotation?
I guess right now, with the lack of depth at power forward, maybe just, like even if you got to throw Stu at power forward for a few minutes because that's just what you need. I don't know if you can do that with Paul at the same time, but I think it's a team option on year 2, right? So essentially it's an expiring. I think the only thing that surprised me with this was it's more than the minimum, and they used his bird rights to sign him. So I just assumed he would have been a minimum player, 3rd string center. I still think he's going to just wear the same shoe that he wore last year of, hey, Duren's out this game, we need you some backup center minutes, or Stu's out, we need you to fill in. So maybe just I would say as a 3rd stringer on the team last year, he might have been the one who played the most, if we group in all our 3rd stringers. So I think I was surprised that he got more than the minimum, but at a 1-year, $5.5 million deal, I don't, since it's a team option, it doesn't bother me that it's not the minimum, but I'm happy he's back. He seems to be bought in. He was on the baseline with the rest of the squad last night. So he definitely seems to enjoy to be here. He helped us out with us waiving him last year and then signing again. He wanted to come back after Trajan did that little weird wave thing last year. So happy to have him back. The guy who's named B-Ball Paul. Yeah, we'll always want that guy on my team. So yeah, happy he's back, but I still don't think he'll be anything more than third center.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like, I think when he was brought in, the Pistons claimed him off waivers after he was waived by the Sixers. Like, I think he's probably he's a little overqualified to be a 3rd big, but maybe a little underqualified to be like a backup big. So I think he's in the perfect position. And Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart at times have struggled with foul trouble. So I think he's like a good guy you can go to like not throw off your rotations or whatever it might be. So I'm happy he's back too. And it's again, another low risk deal that just should help this team get some depth. Maybe they go and get another big at the trade deadline too, in exchange for someone else. We'll see what happens there, but at least the front court will be fairly unchanged. But all right, before we jump to summer league, I want to know your take on, and this is a question we got in the DBB comments from Sports and All too, that we've sort of been saving just to have more certainty, which we kind of have now, with these transactions, additions and departures. Where are you at with this team for next season? Do you think they can sort of replicate what they did last year, maybe push to win a playoff series, or do you think maybe there's a potential step back or a bigger leap forward than we're expecting?
I would say I don't expect to have a similar season like we did last year. Or I guess the way that they look on the court, I expect to look different. One, like I don't even know if Beasley could have duplicated, if he could have come back. Who knows if he could have duplicated what he did last season. So I definitely think my expectations of how they're going to look on the court, the younger guys need to step up. You're not going to get 319, whatever it was, threes from Beasley. So other people are going to have to shoot. Other people are going to have to score. I do like the size that they have. I like, the way the young guys are developing. I expect them to be better. I don't know if I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid and, but I also think with their additions and the way that these young guys have been progressing, like we've seen Ron already grow. We saw Asar last season grow. Cade obviously took a leap. I still think he has another leap in him. So my expectations, I guess, are higher. And if I had to put like a quantitative goal on it, I would say hosting a playoff series, being a top 4 team in the East. And given the Halliburton injury, the Tatum injury, there's definitely, the door's cracked to get into that top 4. So I expect them to be better. And the reason I expect them to be better is due to the growth of the young guys more than anything else.
Yeah, I think when free agency opened up and it coming off the Malik Beasley news, like my gut feeling was like, yeah, there are all these injuries across the East, the door's wide open, but like we're seeing the Hawks get better, and like what are the Pistons really doing? But I think
Orlando getting better.
Orlando trading for Desmond Bane, like that was a guy that I didn't think what Orlando gave up for him was as crazy as like some people. I mean, he's going to
shoot 10 threes a game there.
They need his shooting so
badly.
Yeah, you need a lot to get a player like that. So it's gonna be difficult, but like I just go back to, well, first of all, I think the most important thing with the offseason is like the front office didn't sit on their hands. Like they made the best out of the situation that they were in. I think they did a pretty good job, honestly. But also, like, you have one of the best players in the East. Like, I'm pretty comfortable saying that about Cade Cunningham now. Like, yeah, there's Giannis and all these, like, the Cavs are disappointed about their early exit, and Orlando's getting better. Atlanta, we don't know about what some other teams will look like, but I just think like these stars are really like what carries you, and we saw Cade do that throughout the whole season last year, and he just makes everyone that he plays next to better. Mm-hmm. And with the skill set that like Karis LeVert and Duncan are bringing in as the primary acquisitions, like I think they're perfect players to play next to Cade. Like they should be really, really excited about that. So I think as long as he's still playing at the level we saw throughout all of last year, like I don't see why this team could take a step back. I get the argument of how the team overperformed and no one expected them to have a top 6 seed and give the Knicks some trouble in the playoffs. But like, I think that they're only getting better. And even when you look at like Atlanta and Orlando, like, yeah, they'll be tough, but I don't think, like, I think the Pistons could be better than either or both of those teams.
I feel like this is an easy comparison, but it feels like when the Lions finally started to have some success, like consistency under Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, when they're doing the same thing every year, got the same coaches until this offseason, but you've got the same guys in the building. It's the same routine 2, 3, 4 years in a row. I feel like our guys have not had that, with like Jaden and Duran have had Casey, Monty, and now JB. So it's like they finally have an off season where it's the same coach that the previous season started with. And it's like you finally have some consistency. You're playing with the same guys every time. And obviously they're getting tight with how much they hang out and how many people were at the game yesterday. So it definitely feels like everything is going in the correct direction. But for my Lions comparison, it feels like they're a couple years, the Pistons are a couple years away from the Lions in having that consistency, but it seems like they're in that right. Took the right step. They're in the right direction.
Yeah. And it's like, how hard does it have to be for young guys who are like trying to just, I guess, find their footing in the NBA to almost have to start over every season? And
kidding.
To just not have that, or just, get some consistency, like you said, in the house. Like, that's the one thing that we can't really know how it'll impact until we see what this team looks like next season. But I only see it as a positive. And also you have some interesting, like, younger players who could be getting better, could contribute to the rotation. Like Chaz Lanier is an unknown, like Bobby Klintman. We saw him look good in summer league. Ron Holland absolutely dominated. So before we wrap up, let's talk about that summer league game. The Pistons beat the Knicks 104-86 in their first game in Vegas. Ron Holland looked like the best player on the court, 28 points, 11 rebounds, 3 steals, 2 assists, made 4 for 5 of his 3-pointers. And then Dennis Jenkins had 18 points, 3 for 5 from 3. Bobby Klintman, 10, 8, and 5. And Chaz Lanier had 10 points, 4 assists, 2 for 7 from 3. Every player that started for the Pistons scored in double figures. Bobby Klintman and Chaz Lanier were at the low end of that with 10 points apiece. And Tolu Smith, who was like a G League 2-way guy, had 16 and 11 too. I don't know if he'll be on a 2-way or whatever it might be, but I think I can probably assume your answer. But what stood out to you from the first game we saw from the Summer Pistons?
So obviously it was Ron, right? Like he was killing it. He obviously played exactly like he did, like it was game 6 against the Knicks, where he's diving on the floor. He's put back in offensive rebounds. He missed the first 3, but then drilled. I would say, so 2 things actually I'm going to point out specifically. Obviously his shooting was great. But the shots that he took in the threes that he made to me were different. Right? Like he hit one in the corner that was a catch and shoot from Lanier after he did like the weird catch and pass over, drilled a catch and shoot. His 3 in the other corner, he was kind of like sizing the guy up, little step back and hit that one. So it was like, okay, off the dribble. And then I think his final one, they ran a play for him where he's coming off a screen and he hit coming off the screen, little movement 3 and pulled it. So I think the biggest thing for me from his shooting was how different his threes were. And then I also feel like last year, my biggest like critique of Ron would have been, I feel like he gets tunnel vision on his way to the rim. Now, he's a great rim finisher, so sometimes that tunnel vision, has worked out for him. But I also think there are times where he's putting his head down. Beasley was wide open in the corner with his hands up. Ron's going up and it's getting swatted. It felt like he was a more willing passer last night than he had been trying to get others involved. He only had 2 assists, but he could have had a little bit more. And then the other person that stood out to me, and I'm not a huge draft guy going into it. Like I don't make a big board or anything, but I'm like, oh, the Pistons drafted Bobby Klintman. Time to look up highlights on YouTube and see who this guy is.
Mm-hmm.
I never realized that Bobby is the type of passer that he is until last year's summer league. And it was like, ooh, he can kind of pass a little bit. And then, of course, the first game when he's busting out that behind the back to Tolu for the layup. I think Klintman's best skill set right now is his passing. And to me, I don't know why he can't handle 8 to 10 minutes of being the 5th guy on offense for the bench unit, stand in the corner. If you get an open 3, shoot it. Otherwise, he's not really a ball stopper. He loves to make the one more pass, keep the ball moving around. So I would be happy seeing Bobby getting those 10th man minutes. Just throw him a little bone every once in a while to get him some run. And then lastly, I think Jenkins, he looked good, but I think he's a G League guy. Tolu Smith looked good. I think he's a G League guy, though. There were a lot of times where I was like, oh, go up and dunk it, because Duran is normally the one who gets the put back and he's slamming it back, but he just doesn't have the athleticism like him. And then Lanier for his first game, it felt like when he had catch and shoot opportunities, he was more comfortable than him putting the ball on the floor and trying to make something happen. But that starting 5 that we threw out there has to be like among the elites of summer league lineups, because that starting 5 was just, they all fit perfectly. They were just 1, 2, 3, 4. It was great. I don't know though. I see a comment in here from Mims. If Ron plays another game, here's what I'll say. He just turned 20 like 5 days ago. Chaz Lanier is like 23, and he's going to play every game. So I can see somebody's reasoning or argument for wanting him to play more. And as him being the number 1 option for 4 games, 5 games in a row, whatever it is cool. But I also would understand, I think the only thing that you could ask for from a top 5 second-year player in Summer League is to look like the best player on the court, and he 100% did that. So I'm not sure he needs to prove anything else or that you need to see anything else, but my guess was that I would bet he doesn't play another game.
Yeah, and YouTube user mentioned in the comments that rumor has it that Ron's more likely than not to play at least some in the second game.
Good.
That's like what I was thinking. Like, to me, it was either they'll shut him down or maybe he'll play the first half in the second game. So, I think we'll see him in the second game, but like what YouTube user brought up, I think he's definitely on the verge of getting shut down, which I think, like, I try when we don't have NBA basketball, like summer league is obviously super easy to get excited about, but I always personally just try to more and more level my expectations and I guess think about what we should take out of this stuff. And I think what you said, just the fact that Ron looked like the best player on the court is really one of the biggest things that you can take out of summer league. To me, it's, do these second year guys or third year guys look like they're too good to be here? And if so, they proved exactly what they should. If it's a third year, second round guy who's kind of struggling a bit, it might be a little concern time. But with a top 5 pick like Ron Holland from a year ago, like Matas Buzelis played last night too. So we might see some high picks from last year continue to play in summer league. I think the main thing for me is just you don't want them to get hurt. Summer league games move really fast too. So I think what YouTube user brought up with potentially seeing Ron for a bit in the second game, and then him getting shut down is probably the most likely outcome. Question for you to wrap us up.
Mm-hmm.
And this is so hard to predict. Like every year, I'm just like, can this be the year that the Pistons win Summer League? So they played the Rockets on Sunday, the Wolves on Tuesday, the Heat on Thursday. You probably have to win all three of those games to get into the championship because they just pull the best two teams and they play for the championship. You think the Pistons have any shot to win Summer League?
If Ron plays every game. Did you see what Reed Shepherd did?
Yeah, the Rockets game is gonna be.
He filled the entire stat line. He had a great stat line last night. Yeah, I just think you got to have your guy play the entire time.
Yeah.
I guess if Ron, knock on wood, were to get hurt during a Summer League game, when you and I and everybody else on Pistons Twitter or whatever is talking about our 9-man rotation and that we need more depth, it would be brutal, to not have Ron in there heading into the season. But I also want Bobby to be the number one option with Ron not on the court. I think with Ron's performance, like it was more than you could have hoped for. And now I want to see Bobby, like they put him in some pick and roll situations that he looked really good in. Like he can handle well for a 6'9" guy. But I want to see him do more offensively and then do a little bit more defensively as well. So I guess I would pivot more to making Bobby be the star of the show for the rest of Summer League. But I will not complain if we get to watch more Holland as well, because that dude, he's must-see TV.
Yeah, 100%. And what you brought up with Bobby, like, yeah, if he can be a tertiary playmaker, I think his like international experience really helps with that. And I know he's playing, I think it's the FIBA Euros this year, which will be
Sweden.
Yeah, he's playing for Sweden, and that goes from the end of August until mid-September. So he's going to get even more of those reps, and he has like Germany and Lithuania in his group. So
okay,
cool. I think those competitions, and like he played in the Australian League after a year in Wake Forest. I think that stuff really helps with development. And you see like the international game is just more, I guess, it's not as ISO ball and stuff. So I think it really helps out that he has that experience, and he'll continue to get some more of this off season.
And to be playing against dudes who are not, undrafted 23-year-olds trying to make the league, just trying to be a 15th man on a roster. He's playing with, some real men out there in Germany. So 100%. I do not have a regular pod YouTube user. Sorry, brother.
You should, and it's been long overdue getting you to come on this one. So you're definitely gonna.
Yeah, we'll run it back soon. I'll be back soon, YouTube user.
Yeah, but Robbie, that's all I got. Thank you for joining us. Before I close us out here, do you have any parting thoughts? And definitely, I mean, all of our listeners, of course, need to find you on DBB, but anything else you wanna shout out, or just let everyone know where they can find you elsewhere?
Yeah. Wrote a recent article about why you should be optimistic about this upcoming Pistons season and why they are more talented. So go to DetroitBadBoys.com. If you do not have an account there, make sure you make one, join the community. A lot of nice people over there. And then I've been on Blue Sky a lot, trying to get back into Twitter though. So at Bobby Buckets 313 on Twitter or Blue Sky, give me a follow, and let's talk ball.
Shout out to you again, Robbie, for joining. It was great chatting hoops, and right after we have some actual basketball to talk about and break down the off season. So shout out to everyone who joined us live as well, or if you're listening on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Reminder, feel free to call our phone line. You can ask a question there, hear your voice on the show. The number for that is 313-355 2717. If you're listening to us on YouTube, it would be great if you could press the subscribe button, subscribe to Detroit Bad Boys if you haven't already. Really helps us build this thing out and keep us going. And special thanks to our guy, Sean Corp, who keeps the lights on over at Detroit Bad Boys, the managing editor, and always for his support of the show. Shout out to you guys again for all the great questions and talking points. We'll catch you next week, whether on your commute or live with us on YouTube. We can't wait to talk more Detroit basketball with you all.